Take a breath before you keep reading, because this isn't the kind of thing you skim and forget. This is for the person who's been carrying a feeling they can't quite put into words, someone you think about more than makes sense, someone you should have moved past by now, at least according to the calendar, but somehow you haven't, because the feeling didn't fade the way it was supposed to. It just went quiet. It sits under the surface like a low fire that never fully goes out. Here's the strange part. It doesn't announce itself every day. It's not loud or dramatic. Most of the time it shows up sideways, in a random memory that surfaces out of nowhere, in a small tightness in your chest, in the sense that some invisible thread still connects you to this person even when nothing's being said. That feeling isn't imaginary, and there's usually a reason for it. Somewhere, someone is holding something real for you, something they may not be fully willing to name, even to themselves. And what makes it so intense is that the connection feels off-limits, blocked somehow, maybe by timing, maybe by circumstances, maybe by something neither of you has said out loud. And connections that feel forbidden don't usually get weaker. They tend to get stronger, precisely because they can't move freely. So before you close this and go back to your day, stay with it a little longer. What follows might explain the mixed signals, the strange back and forth, the distance that never quite becomes absence. And if any of this feels uncomfortably close to your own situation, that's not a coincidence. Keep reading, because what's underneath this kind of bond usually runs deeper than it looks on the surface. Somewhere, there's a person who doesn't feel neutral about you. Not casually, not as a passing interest that'll fade in a week. What they feel runs quieter and steadier than that, and it's stronger than they're willing to admit, even to themselves. Maybe at first you were just someone they knew, then you became someone they paid closer attention to, then someone they trusted, and at some point, without either of you marking the exact moment, you turned into someone they couldn't stop thinking about. That's what makes this so complicated. This didn't grow out of boredom or convenience or just being around each other a lot. It grew because something in you resonated with something in them. Some kind of recognition that isn't easy to explain. And that's exactly why it feels so charged now. What's standing in the way isn't a lack of feeling. It's everything else. Timing, obligations, fear, existing commitments, the quiet rules people build their lives around. Those are the things that make someone step back, even while some other part of them is leaning forward. So if you've noticed that the emotional intensity doesn't match the amount of actual movement, that's usually why. It's rarely because someone cares less. More often, it's because they care more than they're prepared to deal with, and they already sense that one honest step could unravel more than they're ready to unravel. Keep that in mind, because it matters more than it seems to at first. Here's the first thing worth understanding clearly. This person isn't really resisting you. They're resisting themselves. They wake up and find you already somewhere in their thoughts, and almost on instinct, they try to shut that down. They replay small moments, a conversation, the particular way you looked at them, the feeling of being genuinely understood, and then they pull back from it because letting themselves want you feels like it threatens something they've already built. For some people, that threat is an existing relationship. For others, it's family expectations, or the discomfort of admitting they're not on the path they thought they were supposed to be on. Sometimes the real issue isn't the connection itself, it's what the connection exposes. It shows them how much of their current life doesn't actually feel true anymore. So they go quiet, they hold back, they observe instead of say anything, they retreat instead of admit. And silence like that is easy to misread. It can look like calm, it can look like distance, or even indifference. But very often it isn't emptiness at all. It's the opposite. It's overload. It's what happens when someone is feeling too much and has nowhere safe to put it. So if this person seems composed and unbothered on the outside, don't assume there's nothing happening underneath. Usually the opposite is true. And this is where things get complicated, because the more they resist, the stronger the feeling tends to get. That's the nature of suppressed emotion. It doesn't necessarily fade with time. Sometimes it just compresses, it intensifies, because it has nowhere else to go. Every time they stop themselves from reaching out, the feeling doesn't disappear. It just moves further underground. Every act of restraint adds a little more pressure. Every time they act unaffected, the truth keeps pushing quietly from beneath the surface. That's probably why you feel these odd shifts with this person, moments where they seem close, even in complete silence. Moments where they're physically distant but somehow still present in a way you can't explain. Moments where they cross your mind for no obvious reason. That unfinished feeling is unfinished for a reason. Whatever hasn't been named or confronted or lived out keeps circling underneath everything, shaping the timing, shaping the strange sense that something's happening even when nothing visible is. And for them, this is genuinely exhausting. They might look calm, steady, dependable from the outside, but internally there's a constant tug-of-war between what they want and what they think they should want, between honesty and the fear of what honesty would cost them. If this connection feels heavy to carry, it's because it's not just about attraction. It's carrying pressure. It's carrying meaning. It's carrying the possibility of real change, and change is exactly what they're trying to avoid. That's also why putting distance between you hasn't brought the relief you expected. Time doesn't erase something that actually meant something. If this had been shallow, pure chemistry, convenience, curiosity, it would have burned off by now. It didn't. It stayed. Maybe not with the same intensity every single day, but it stayed. Because it isn't running on habit. It's running on something more like emotional truth. Something shifted in both of you when this started. You probably felt it as a kind of recognition, an ease that didn't make logical sense but felt undeniably real. They felt some version of that too. That's why this doesn't behave like an ordinary attraction. It doesn't weaken just because it's inconvenient. It doesn't vanish just because logic says it should. It keeps resurfacing because something underneath it is still unresolved. Here's a part that's easy to miss. This was never only about wanting each other. It's also about what you each stirred up in the other person. You may have woken up parts of them that had been dormant for years. They may have reflected something back to you that had been waiting to be seen. So yes, the longing is real, but there's something underneath the longing that matters even more. A kind of awakening, a truth working its way closer to the surface. That's part of why this bond has been so hard to just let go of. They might go through their days looking completely normal, working, showing up for family, doing what's expected, but their mind keeps circling back to what feels unresolved, and something in them keeps returning to whatever made them feel most alive. They remember how easy things felt with you. They remember feeling understood without having to explain themselves constantly. They remember small moments that, logically, shouldn't have mattered much, but somehow did. And that's exactly what unsettles them, because once someone has felt truly seen at that level, it's hard to go back to convincing yourself that a shallower connection is enough. That's the private cost of holding back. What gets suppressed doesn't just disappear, it leaks out sideways. Restlessness. A kind of low-grade dissatisfaction with choices that used to feel solid. New questions that weren't there before. Why does my life feel tight lately? Why does something feel like it's missing? Why don't I feel as settled as I used to? And whether or not they ever say your name out loud in that context, you're quietly part of those questions. You've become the contrast between the life they know and the truth they're avoiding. So if you've wondered whether this changed them too, it did. Maybe quietly, maybe in ways they'd never admit. But it did. It shifted how they see themselves. It changed what they're able to keep ignoring. It changed what feels real to them now. And once that kind of internal shift starts, it doesn't fully reverse. Here's the second thing worth understanding. You've been changing too, not just them. This connection isn't only stirring something in them, it's waking something up in you as well. Since meeting them, you've probably noticed your own standards shifting. Things you used to tolerate now feel unbearably thin. What used to pass for affection now feels like the bare minimum. What used to feel like connection now feels closer to half-presence. You're becoming more attuned to what real depth actually feels like. And once you know that feeling, it's genuinely hard to settle for less again. That's part of why letting go of this has felt so complicated. It was never only about the other person. It's about what the whole experience revealed to you. It showed you how honest your own heart is capable of being. It showed you what real emotional resonance actually feels like, as opposed to just attention. It showed you the difference between being noticed and being truly recognized. And that matters, because not every powerful connection is meant to become a relationship right away. Some connections exist first to wake you up, to sharpen your instincts, to make you less willing to abandon yourself just to keep someone close. So if you felt torn between longing for this person and growing as a person, understand it this way. The lesson here isn't to pause your life and wait. It's to deepen your life. It's meant to make you more honest, more self-aware, more self-respecting, and more prepared for a love that doesn't require secrecy or confusion or emotional starvation to survive. That's not a small shift. That's real growth. And still, there's a reason this bond feels both meaningful and a little dangerous at the same time, because it doesn't just offer attraction, it offers truth. And truth is threatening to people who've spent years building a life around certain roles and routines and expectations. You're not the reason everything suddenly feels unstable for them. You're the contrast that revealed the instability that was already there. You didn't crack their world open. You illuminated the places where it was already cracked. That's why they might come close and then retreat. Why you might feel warmth from them one day and distance the next. It's not that they don't know what they feel. It's that they do know, and knowing brings pressure. Pressure to choose, to admit something, to actually change. Most people aren't ready for that pressure the moment truth shows up. So they stall. They rationalize. They tell themselves it's just a phase, or nothing more than imagination, and they try to wait it out. But real emotional connections rarely disappear just because they're neglected. Instead, they turn into internal pressure, something the person keeps running into in quiet moments, in restless nights, in the gap between a life that looks fine from the outside and one that no longer feels right on the inside. If any of this sounds familiar, this is where your part in the story actually matters. Your job isn't to carry their fear for them. It isn't to decode every silence until it resolves into certainty. Your job is to stay honest with yourself while the truth works itself out on both sides, theirs and yours. That's where your own strength starts to come back online. Because the most dangerous part of a connection like this isn't the longing itself. It's the way longing can make you lose track of your own life. It can turn you into someone constantly scanning for signs instead of actually living. It can have you holding space for someone's potential while reality keeps handing you uncertainty instead. But something in you is shifting now too. You're learning that depth of feeling doesn't obligate you to endless waiting. You're learning that love shouldn't require abandoning yourself to sustain it. You're learning that mystery isn't the same thing as readiness, and that intensity isn't the same thing as alignment. That distinction matters. It lets you keep your heart open without leaving your boundaries wide open to confusion. You can care about someone and still stay grounded. You can feel the pull of a real connection and still refuse to build your future around someone else's indecision. You can stay compassionate without making yourself endlessly available for half measures. That's maturity. That's really the whole lesson buried in this experience. And once you start holding the connection that way, something changes. It can still matter to you deeply, but it stops running your inner life. It becomes something you understand rather than something that controls you. From that place, you stop needing to chase clarity because clarity starts to show up on its own, through actions, through consistency, through what someone actually does over time rather than what they hint at. Now here's where a connection like this meets its real test. If it's ever going to turn into something real out in the open, it needs more than feeling, more than chemistry, more than a quiet, unspoken understanding between two people. It needs courage, mutual courage, from both sides, not just one. The courage to say things plainly instead of relying on implication. The courage to stop hiding behind circumstances that no longer reflect what's actually true. The courage to let behavior finally match the emotion underneath it. Without that, even the deepest connection stays suspended in place, still meaningful, still powerful, but incomplete. Maybe that incompleteness used to feel like loss to you. But there's a bigger truth worth seeing here. Meaning doesn't only come from outcome. Some connections become a shared future. Others become a turning point instead. A bridge between the person you were and the person you're becoming. That doesn't make them less real. It just defines what role they were meant to play. So if this person ever does reach real readiness, you won't have to guess about it. It won't arrive through riddles or half messages or lingering emotional hovering or long stretches of ambiguity. Genuine readiness looks different. It chooses clearly. It shows up openly. It's consistent, not sporadic. And if that never happens, that's information too. Silence isn't automatically mysterious. Inaction is still a kind of answer. Delay is still a choice, even when it's never spoken out loud. That's exactly why your path forward can't be contingent on whether or when this person wakes up to what they feel. Your life is asking you to move with integrity now, not on some future date that may never arrive. And that's something you're becoming genuinely capable of. As time passes, one of two things usually happens in situations like this. Either the person eventually rises to meet the truth they've been avoiding, or they retreat further into what feels safe and familiar. Some people choose honesty over comfort. Some choose real growth over a life that only looks stable from a distance. Some finally admit that what they feel can't be managed or contained forever, but others go the other direction. They burrow deeper into routine, protect the image of the life they've built, and start mistaking numbness for peace, because real change asks more of them than they're willing to give. Both paths reveal something important, and they reveal it through behavior, not promises. That's where your answers actually live now. Not in vague signals, not in emotional energy, not in fantasy, but in what someone consistently does over time. So this is where you need to stay anchored, not shut off, not cold, just anchored. You don't need to rescue anyone from their own fear. You don't need to sit in emotional limbo while someone slowly decides whether the truth is convenient enough to face. You don't need to carry a one-sided connection and call it devotion. What you actually need is balance, openness without abandoning yourself, warmth without erasing yourself, hope without losing your judgment along the way. That's the real lesson underneath all of this. This bond came into your life to sharpen your sense of what you deserve, not to trap you in waiting, to raise your standards, not lower them, to make you more honest about what real love actually requires, and real love requires more than secret intensity. It requires participation, presence, responsibility, courage from both people, not just one carrying the emotional weight alone. So, the whole thing starts to look different from here. It might still matter to you. It might still mean something real. But it no longer needs to swallow you whole. You're starting to understand that some of the most powerful connections aren't meant to be possessed. They're meant to wake something up. They arrive with force, stir things that had gone quiet, break old patterns, expose a hunger you didn't fully realize you had. And then they leave you with a question that changes everything. Do you go back to sleep? Or do you become more honest with yourself because of what you felt? That's the real turning point. Not whether someone is secretly wrapped up in you, not whether the timing will ever perfectly align, but whether you can hold on to your own worth while standing inside something this intense. And look at what you're actually learning through all of this. You're learning to feel deeply without spiraling into fantasy. You're learning to trust your intuition without abandoning your judgment. You're learning that a meaningful connection can be real and still not be enough on its own, unless it eventually becomes grounded in something concrete. That lesson will protect you for a long time. It'll stop you from mistaking crumbs for a full meal. It'll stop you from confusing emotional tension with actual emotional availability. It'll stop you from shrinking your own needs just because a connection feels rare. That's growth, quiet, steady, the kind that eventually changes how you love, how you choose, how you walk away, and how you recognize the real thing when it finally arrives. And yes, there's still a chance that someday this person reaches the edge of whatever they've been avoiding and decides they can't keep living a divided life. If that day comes, it probably won't come with drama or big declarations. It'll come quietly, with clarity. They might finally realize that what they've been avoiding has only gotten heavier the longer they stayed silent about it. They might finally see that staying where they are costs more than the risk of being honest ever would. If that day comes, you'll know the difference immediately, not because the energy suddenly feels more intense, but because it feels clean, direct, steady, responsible, less guessing, more choosing, less symbolism, more presence. But until that day, if it ever comes at all, your task stays the same. Keep living, keep growing, keep becoming someone who doesn't confuse a hidden feeling with an actual lived relationship. Someone who stays open to what's real, not just what's theoretically possible. Someone who understands that love is supposed to expand your life, not shrink it down into a waiting room. That's the quiet strength you're stepping into right now. And if any of this landed the way it seems to have, it's probably because some part of you was already ready to hear it. So keep going, stay grounded in your own truth, and let actions, not words, tell you what's real. And hold on to this. Whatever is genuinely meant for you will never ask you to betray yourself in order to receive it. In the end, this was never really only about someone else's hidden feelings. It was about your own awakening, about what this connection forced you to notice, about what you can no longer accept, what you actually need, and how much of yourself you're no longer willing to give up in the name of love. That's the real gift in all of this. You're not the same person who first stepped into this. You see things more clearly now. You understand that deep emotion without honesty just turns into suffering. You understand that recognition without action stays incomplete. You understand that longing isn't proof of destiny, and silence isn't always sacred. Sometimes it's just fear, dressed up to look meaningful. You're not here to romanticize fear anymore. You're here for the real thing, mutual effort, honesty, a connection that can stand in daylight instead of only existing in private thoughts. So whether this person eventually finds the courage to be honest, or whether they end up staying only a chapter that changed you, you're already moving towards something stronger. You're becoming someone who can honor depth without losing herself in it. Someone who can love fully without dissolving into someone else's indecision. Someone who can release what's unclear and still stay open to what's real. That's not loss. That's alignment. That's what this whole experience came to teach you. So if you needed a final answer, here it is. You don't have to chase after something that can't yet stand beside you. All you need to do is keep becoming the version of yourself who recognizes real love when it finally shows up, receives it without fear, and never again mistakes confusion for fate.